Week 2 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few start-sit running backs this week. The first starts Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. As Stevenson still had a pretty solid week 1 versus the Eagles, even though it was a ball game where they were trailing a lot. But we know Stevenson's one of the better receiving running backs out of the backfield. He can make some big plays. This is Stevenson, and he's a vocal point of this offense as well over there in New England. So right now, with a pretty decent matchup versus the Dolphins that got shredded on the ground by Joshua Kelly and Austin Ekeler in week 1. I think Stevenson could go out there once again and have a good ball game versus the division rival. And I have him as a start this week. The next back's Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. I know Robinson, he only had 9 carries in the ball game and 4 or 5 grabs, but he still had a nice ball game, over 20 fantasy points in PPR leagues. He's an explosive running back, and he's got a pretty decent matchup here versus the Green Bay Packers coming to town. So Bijan, we know he's an athlete. We know he could go out there and make some big plays, and that's what he showed with explosiveness, even though we saw Algier get a lot of work as well in that ball game. So right now, Bijan Robinson, once again, he's a running back I would start. Next back's Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Breece Hall, he looked very well for a guy coming off the ACL injury. A lot of burst, a lot of speed, and breakaway home run hitting type of performance as well for Breece Hall. So I know it's a tough matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys, a defense that dominated and shut down the New York Giants in week 1. But I think Breece Hall still could find the running lanes in this one. Cowboy defense last season wasn't good versus the run. And right now, I honestly, Breece Hall should be getting way more carries, in my opinion, than Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, he had a decent week 1, but Breece Hall, this guy could be a top 10 running back easily this season if he just gets opportunity and remains healthy. So this week, even versus a good Dallas Cowboy defense, the Jets are going to rely on him heavily, obviously, because Zach Wilson, I don't think they trust a lot. And Breece Hall is definitely a running back to start this week. The next back's James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So I thought Cook had a pretty decent ball game, catching the ball out of the backfield as well in week 1 versus a good New York Jet defense. So right now, he's got a better matchup, obviously, on paper here in week 2 versus the Vegas Raiders, with Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams were pretty decent versus the Raiders in week 1. So right now, James Cook looks like he's the man over there, with Damian Harris getting a few snaps and carries here and there. But like I said, Cook could do it all. He could pass protect, could run in between the tackles, and he could catch the football out of the backfield. So this week here, I have him as a nice number 2 running back option. And a start next back's Damian Pierce of the Houston Texans. I know Pierce, he didn't have a good week 1, but it was just the way of the game flow here, where Stroud had to throw the football 44 times, which obviously isn't ideal, and it wasn't a close ball game throughout versus the Ravens. But right here, home opener for the Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts division rival. I think this could be a close game, obviously, between these two teams, going in the same direction, similar with 2 young quarterbacks. So right now, Damian Pierce, I think, has a bounce-back game. He's going to get more workload, and the game script should obviously favor him in this one. So I got him as a start. Next start, Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. So Javonte Williams, another player coming off the ACL injury, just like Breece Hall. And I thought Williams, he looked pretty good, splitting carries pretty much with Samaje Perine in week 1. So right now, the Washington Commanders are coming to town here. James Conner, he had a pretty decent ball game as well week 1 versus the Washington Commanders. And I think Javonte Williams in this one, he can run the football heavily. He could get the goal line work as well in this ball game. And he's definitely a running back that can make some plays. So right now, I like Williams as a start this week. And as long as he's getting the 15, 18 touches per game, I think he can carve out a decent role as a number 2 running back for fantasy owners. Next back, Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. So I know J.K. Dobbins out for the season, torn Achilles, which is very unfortunate, obviously. So him and Justice Hill are going to be the backs. But right here, I always like Gus Edwards as an in-between-the-tackle type of running back, short yardage back, and even a back that could catch a couple balls per game as well. So right, a lot of confidence over there in Baltimore with Gus Edwards. And obviously, I think this definitely could be a 50-50 split between these two guys to go on to start early on here before someone catches fire and becomes the number 1 running back over there in Baltimore. So Gus Edwards, I think he's going to start the game off with Justice Hill sprinkled in. And Edwards, if he could get things going early and often in this one, I think he's a perfect number 2 running back for fantasy owners. And it's a pretty good matchup as well versus the Cincinnati Bengals, where we saw Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford both have pretty solid games in week 1. And the final running back I would start this week is Jamal Williams of the New Orleans Saints. I know in week 1 we didn't see much out of Jamal Williams, but right now there's pretty much no one over there threatening him for carries over there until Kamara comes back, with Keandre Miller banged up as well. So Jamal Williams, we know he's a goal line vulture. You know, he could get you easily 10, 15 points in a ball game. And he's got a good matchup with the Carolina Panthers that just got shredded on the ground by Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, with them combining for over 100 yards in that Week 1 ball game. So right now, with a good matchup, with him getting the workload over there, no threat until Kamara comes back, I think it's a good start this week here is Jamal Williams as a number 2 running back or a flex option for fantasy owners. Now to the sit side of things, Dalvin Cook's a sit for me here in Week 1. Breece Hall, I believe, should get more carries, and it's a tough matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys as well. So Cook, he had a couple decent runs, but not much of notability in terms of fantasy points here. So right now, well, he didn't do much in Week 1, and Breece Hall clearly outplayed Dalvin Cook in Week 1 here. He's a running back I would sit with matchup and opportunity. Next back's Alexander Mattison of the Minnesota Vikings. So Madison, he didn't look all that great in Week 1 with a touchdown saving him versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. But right here, Thursday Night Football, tough matchup. Obviously, with the Philadelphia Eagles here, with Minnesota going over there. And I think this Philly team, they're going to try to shut down the run early and often. Obviously, they're going to try to zero in at Justin Jefferson as well. But this is a tough matchup here for Alexander Mattison. So this week, I know most people are going to start him, but I don't really see him having a good ball game. So I got him as a sit. Next back's DeAndre Swift, staying in the same game of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Kenneth Gainwell pretty much was the number 1 back clearly. And obviously in Week 1 with Swift barely seeing the field. Boston Scott, he got a few snaps as well. But I don't know how fantasy owners could go out there and start DeAndre Swift after he pretty much only had 4 touches in this ball game in Week 1 in a matchup at the New England Patriots. And right now, Minnesota, I know they're not that great against the run here, but DeAndre Swift, I can't trust him after the workload we saw. And it looks like over there in Philly, he's going to be a sporadic back that they'll use him as a change of pace guy and passing downs here or there pretty much after what we saw in Week 1. The next back's Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Week 1, I said to sit Harris. He didn't do anything for fantasy owners. And I know workload's been there for Harris over the last couple years, but he's not really an effective running back and not really a running back that can do much catching the football out of the backfield. So right now with a tough matchup versus the Cleveland Browns that pretty much held Joe Mixon down and that whole Bengal offense as a whole here, it's going to be a tough day once again. Like I said, Deontay Johnson's out, and they're going to zero in on the run, I believe, Cleveland, and try to have Kenny Pickett beat them in this ball game. So right now, with another tough matchup, and Jalen Warren eating into the workload a little bit as well, he's a sit for me. Next back's Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Pacheco, he had a couple decent runs with 9.5 fantasy points in Week 1 for this Chief team. But right here in Week 2, if Travis Kelce's back in this ball game, they're going to be throwing the football a little bit more, I believe, over here is this Kansas City Chiefs team. And we even saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire get 7 carries in this ball game. So right now, Helaire, he's still an option over there in the backfield for this Chiefs team. He's not going away. Trevor McKinnon, I know he didn't have many touches in the ball game, but he's still going to be a factor as well in passing downs, I believe. And also, like I said, this Jaguar team, they're pretty decent versus the run. They shut down the Colts running game with Deion Jackson and Eric Cole before he got hurt in Week 1. So with all those things, he's a sit for me. Miles Sanders is the next sit at the running back position. Miles Sanders, I know he's been a decent back throughout the years, but in Week 1, just because of that touchdown, pretty much saved his day with 10.5 fantasy points. So right now with a tough matchup versus a pretty stout run defense over there for the New Orleans Saints here, I think it's going to be a tough game for Sanders. And this Saint team could get off to a good start where they got to be one-dimensional as well. And also Chuba Hubbard, he had a decent amount of work as well in this ball game where he's been a valuable backup and a guy getting 40% of the touches in that ball game in Week 1. So with all those factors, Miles Sanders, he's not more than a number 2 running back option in deeper leagues or a flex option, I believe. And I got him as a sit this week. Raheem Mostert, another sit. I know Week 1, he had a decent fantasy day, but that touchdown saved Raheem Mostert as well for fantasy owners in the Miami Dolphins. We know this Dolphin team's a pass-first team. Tough matchup versus New England Patriots that pretty much shut down the majority of the running game over there for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Raheem Mostert, like I said, he's a running back that he's been injury-prone throughout his career, and he's pretty much just going to get a few carries to offset the heavy pass game here for this Miami Dolphin team. So right now, I have him as a sit, and the final running back I have as a sit this week is Cam Akers, a Los Angeles Rams. A tough matchup here in Week 2 versus San Francisco 49ers, one of the best defenses in the league, no doubt about it. And Kyren Williams, he got a majority of the snaps as well in this game. And Cam Akers, he's just not productive. 22 carries for 29 yards in a touchdown for week 1. You're going to cut it, obviously, with only averaging a little bit over 1 yard per carry. So with Kyren Williams in there a lot in week 1, and with the tough matchup and bad production by Cam Akers, he's definitely a running back I would sit this week. So that's a few running backs start sit for week 2 of the fantasy football season.